There we go again.
Morning, boss.
Good to see you, Kurt.
You too.
I
And look how fucking cheerful you are this morning.
was watching the Good Dude show. It's really excellent. I didn't get to finish it though. I'm like, too many channels, man. It'll be all right. I didn't get finished with the Good Dude show, and I'm trying to talk to these guys on this crazy machine right here. And it's like, okay, here we are, this machine. Just hanging out with Kurt. I had a chat with my nephew, the law student, and it's like we were having a discrete discussion about disambiguation of the law and where the meaning in the law lay. And I said, we're working on this problem today. I want to tell you.
What did he say?
We're going to have a discussion about it at length later. He's like, it requires judgment. The decidability is not there. I said, well, I don't know that I can agree to that at this point, and I'm going to work on this with Kurt today.
Well, you just brought up a really, really good question.
I know, but I'm not warmed up yet, man.
I'm not either, so I'm going to write it down.
Oh, you write it down. And then I will forbear while you write it down, and I will tell you my stories of the week, which I've become aware this week. I became aware that every day becomes increasingly more weird, which is if today the weirdness is 10, tomorrow will be 11. And then we recalibrate it to 10. And tomorrow will still be 11. Every day is getting weirder and weirder. And I'm like, it's like this. I said, I was talking to my patients, and this week I framed it like this, which is, it's like my life appears that I'm living in a Batman comic book. And Batman does not appear in this episode. And the Riddler and the Joker and the Penguin are running the freaking apparatus of the state. It's like, oh my God. And it's up to us to organize to make this desist, to regain control, because Batman will not appear. I had this other. Go ahead.
Among historians, they'd say, well, Americans do this quite often, actually.
What is that?
Produce political crises that cause reformation, because just like our law is post hoc, no, not post. Post is after, right?
Yes.
Proper. I've only been awake 6 or 8 minutes.
You're doing great work.
So I gotta get there. Gotta have the coffee hit me.
That's right. It's got to get some time to work its way in.
So our law is opportunity favoring rather than conflict avoiding. Where in Europe, their law is conflict avoiding, and in the rest of the world, it's everything oppressing. So, given that our governments are actually weak, we have to have cyclical, essentially equivalent of economic reorganizations or crashes. This manifests in a political system as well, because the government's too weak. And so we go through these things on 30 or 70-year cycles, depending on which historian you look for. And so they said, well, we had our Civil War, but we had the 1812 problem, we had the 1930 problem, we had the 1960s problem. We go through these cycles just every bit generation or two, and if I had not woken up only 6 minutes ago, I bet I could recall which historian wrote which theory of which time frame, but I can't right now.
It's okay. It's okay. This is not a test. This is not a test. This is real.
So anyway, this is, people think this is an oddity, but it's actually part of the unconscious structure of producing government that's not strong enough to force people to do much except by the way that they do it and the way we don't like, which is propaganda and information coercion. So this is why in our history, the government hasn't been as important as pulpit printing, mass publication, radio, television, and mass media. Is the government has been less able, and it's also part of why our social media is causing so much disruption, and why our government and our social media and the activist left is trying to destroy social media and restore restore the pulpit, the press, and everything. Is because we are more dependent in a democratic society is more dependent on knowledge, and the government's more depending on the ability to use information than a powerful government. I mean, China's the opposite. Powerful government depends on disinformation. And we're more dependent upon the ability to reach collective conclusions in order to maintain and avoid these cyclical crashes. So what's happening now is the government, social media has, the evolution of the web and social media has democratized, and it's eliminated the ability of the government to function as a pulpit of, etc. My work is that the only thing the government can do is the via negativa, which while maintaining liberty, which is to speak the fucking truth at all times, and therefore instead of steer the population in a given direction, prohibit the population from being missteered in a wrong direction. And so that's why I consider my work so important to the continuation of, self-determination, liberty, sovereignty, freedom, liberty, but self-determination, sovereignty, liberty, freedom, in that order, and individual responsibility, because it provides the government with a means of not claiming it has knowledge, preserving the the evolutionary computational advantage of having a post hoc legal system and the extraordinary freedoms of all that we have, and a government that's actually weak. And it depends on one factor, not that the government is powerful, not that the government can propagandize, but instead that the government speaks the fucking truth. And so, since, as far as I can tell, everybody would like that. Well, I'm not sure certain segments of the population would like knowing they're bottom of the genetic hierarchy and therefore they're dependents, or I'm not sure that certain sexes of the population would like knowing that they're actually destructive to everything I just mentioned. But the answer is that if you understand, we're at a point now where I can say these things and people understand, you do, and the audience vaguely understands what I'm talking about. I can make such proclamations, but the idea really is just that, is that continuation of maximization of evolutionary computation by the prohibition of government from telling falsehoods, thereby allowing it possible to have the institutions of democratic government via post-conflict law, and in other words, post-conflict law, maximizing the opportunity to innovate, adapt, and apply. So discover, innovate, apply, and adapt. So it's just, to me, I'm just trying to do physics. Like I'm trying to filter all the deceit and in cooperation and crime and everything else out of the with this nice fine coffee filter, so that something relatively pure comes out the bottom of it, which we call the potential for human progress and continuation of human prosperity. And then some idiot comes along and says something like, "Oh, you're a nerd," or "That's too many words," or "You're incomprehensible," or I'm like, well, fuck you, idiot. I'm trying to do all this stuff, and
it takes a minute to catch up.
In your mouth, and you're the fact that you're able to keep breathing and eating and imitating speech once in a while is interfering with my great project to save you from your own stupidity. So fine. Sorry, I just had to go.
That was a good rant.
That was a good rant.
It was. It was. Now you have to have some coffee. And now I finished telling
I
you.
have chocolate too.
Oh,
Hershey's
good.
Kisses.
You're not
Hershey's
fooling around.
Kisses with my chocolate, with my coffee.
Good man. So I was talking to my patients and I was like, that it's interesting and resonating well with them. And I said it like this. I said that the interesting function that we're facing right now is that if you were to pay me any amount of money to come up with an idea to cause the authorities that are losing power to lose more credibility, I could not exceed their rate of production of nonsensical ideas that make them look bad. I couldn't do it, not to save my life. It's like it had to go with the $30 million crack pipe fiasco. It's just you.
$30 million crack pipe fiasco. Oh, okay, good. Please, yes, do.
So the fact that the Biden administration is spending money for drug paraphernalia for safety, public safety, is I could never have thought of that. I'm not that creative. I can't do it. It's amazing.
One of the problems of critique, the female method, is that specifically because critique or undermining, reputation destruction is a via negativa. It's a via negativa because they can't invent anything via positiva, because they can't systematize, and they can't figure out how to compete for excellence, innovation, which is why women never do. Is that if you succeed in undermining long enough, you eventually end up in a position where you have to create via positivas. That's what you're describing. So they're in a position where they have to create via positivas, and they fucking can't, because it's actually a genetic inability to create them.
It's amazing. Just acting stupid. It's just
and so you end up with running out of things to complain about white men about, and then having to rally around things that are increasingly cyclically. It's like it's equivalent of virtue signal collapse, right?
That's an interesting premise.
And so or virtue spirals, right? Virtue spirals when virtue signal collapses.
Okay.
I just want to insert that the secret to killing mouse utopia like this is you have to just kill a very small number of mice. But I won't say that because some will correctly interpret what I mean by that.
You're saying there's like a limit for the skull stackers.
Well, there's a limit. I mean, the problem with critique, with female method, with the Jewish method, the female method, the Abrahamic method, the Marxist Pomo Wolf method, which is just a female method, is what you're really trying to do is undermine the via positiva evolutionary group, the males, right? The people who convert the universe to use. You're trying to undermine them under the pretense that you could get in the position where you could maximize more of your consumption, maybe even control them. Except what you're doing, of course, is you're cutting off the evolutionarily adaptive stream. You're cutting off the conversion of the universe's matter and energy into consumptions, right? To feed the herd. So, it's like picking a cow to pasture and then letting them eat all the fucking grass and then cover the whole fucking thing with feces. And so there's nothing left to eat except fecal matter, right? I mean, it's just, that's I try to pull up something vaguely humorous, to make the analogy, but that's really what it is. So the problem for the feminine mind is they're not innovative. They're just hyper consumptive. So when they say innovative, they think they're creative. They're not. They're just configuring new ways to consume. They're not figuring or no new ways to self-express, which is just consumption. They're not thinking of new ways to produce. right? Convert energy into mass for consumption, right? So what happens is that when they use critique or the female method or the Abrahamic method or the whatever, is you eventually run out of people who are causing adaptation, or you've killed the institutions. One of the subjects we covered yesterday, which I thought I was afraid of going into depth on, with just how, Max was saying, look how damaging women are to every single human organization. They actually destroy the ability of the internal organization to compete, which causes, gradual degenerations of the ability of the organization to compete. Well, what are they doing to our civilization? They're destroying its ability to compete. What are they doing to our government? They're destroying its ability to compete. What are they doing to our society? They're destroying its ability to compete. But they're actually destroying the ability to compete. Why? Because competition is antithetical to the female mind. They only work by redistribution, which is output, but they have to have something to output. Now, of course, Max brought up the second point, is that the female mind doesn't think, it only feels and then justifies. So it doesn't systematize and predict, and then it says just cruises devolution. So I mean, we forget that the female mind, which is what the left is just hyper consumptive. That's all it is. It doesn't think, it feels. It's not really human in the sense that it's rational. It's human in the sense that it's biological form and has human intuitions, but it's really childhood. Lefthood is, and femalehood is childhood. It's extended childhood. Children aren't capable of getting to the point where a female is. The female mind isn't capable of getting to the point where the male mind is, right? But that's just what. So we just try to mature, and the problem, of course, is that you run out of females who can make it into the male mind really quickly, and then you only, even among males, you get only 2/3 of us can get in the male mind, and among the male, those 2/3 of us that can get into the male mind, only some percentage of us are actually capable of sufficient agency to actually cause innovative discovery, innovation, adaptation, and evolution of the group. So I mean, but men were like, well, it's a fucking hierarchy. Okay, I just just tell me what my fucking job is, so that everybody's gonna like me, and I'll do my fucking job fine. As long as I'm not starving and nobody hates me, I'm gonna be happy. But no, women are never fucking happy, because there's always some guy with more status and money to fuck, and there's always more shoes to buy, right? There's more girlfriends whose attention I can try to get. So I mean, they never fucking run out of it, because they're never fucking happy. So on global scale, then I can hear all the Naxalt triggers going off, and any woman who ever hears what I'm saying, but just the empirical evidence that everything I'm saying is so painfully true, and it's was so painfully common knowledge in history, that you can only think about the industrialization of feminine lying by the use of mass media to overcome all that historical knowledge. See, I went off another fucking rant there.
There you did. There was it's interesting, because it's like what occurred to me, and as I have not quite completed that episode, which is, they can't hear you anyway, Kurt. None of them can. It's just so you know, don't have to worry about them misunderstanding you. They can't hear you.
Well, I mean, they can't even hear it, a little more or less.
No, they can't stand to even begin to hear it. Like,
well, that's why men have to be responsible, because almost every, and it's important. Men have to be responsible, even if that responsibility means just listening to and following men higher up the chain of capacity, because otherwise the women and the beta males or the gamma males, they'll fucking destroy everything.
Yes, so it occurred to me in listening and in conversation with the gentleman this morning, there's a conflict. The conflict is among the elites are vying for the capacity to program the NPCs, is how they talked about it. Non-player characters, the ones that have no agency, are being programmed by the social institutions, and there's a competition. And the middle is they're trying to rally the lower end to dominate the middle through democratic means.
Yes,
that's all.
It's devolution either way.
But it's like what we have done is arrived at the John Galt moment, when all the men have left and allow this nonsense to express itself as it must, which is nonsensically. And so, and it becomes increasingly apparent that the elephant is running rampant without a rider.
Yeah, but I mean, thank you. You're correct. Absolutely correct. We've reached that point, right? Which is we're saying the same thing from different. You started out with the position. I stated two further positions, and you stated the fourth position, right? Which is all saying the same fucking thing, right? Is that, and the point we should realize is that if you let women, the female mind, have control, in other words, if you stop taking fucking responsibility for your polity, and moreover, as the power of government, of industry, of institutions increases, that you don't maintain that power, Second Amendment being the origin of that power, that you are just being lazy. And so this is my view, is that this is what every historian says, is what happens is the people who practice military loyalty and hierarchy are the best, do produce the what conquers or rules. The problem is that they make it possible for a middle class and a clerical class, right? And so that middle class and clerical class get to the point where the clerical class has consumed all the rents. They've sold all the lies through attention to maximize the rents and therefore attention. And the middle class has raised everybody to population, and the population to wealth, where they have some freedom. But none of those people have the same loyalty and hierarchy and duty that the military people did. And so what happens is everybody overexpands. Well, the way the Chinese handle it is they never fucking let anybody get there. Right? The way the Muslims handle it is the female method, right? If anybody gets there, they just undermine them, right? They just, because that's what Islam is, continuous recursive undermining. What do the Christians do? Well, the Christians would have been just like the Muslims, continuously cursive undermining. But what happened is the aristocracy got a hold of the church, just like England got a hold of the church. And you wonder why England invented the modern state, because England got a hold of the fucking church, right? And so the problem is that who's holding the church has to be the military. So when I say monarchy, military, cabinet, judiciary, parliament, and the houses of parliament, the nobility, the middle class, and the peasantry, and then the citizenry, right? I'm saying that for the same reason, because it's duty and hierarchy, just like the military. It maintains duty and hierarchy, right, of the military across the population, but it doesn't. But by using the via negativa, which is what we do, rule of law, it means that all the top does is decide what's no.
Right.
Right. The bottom decides what's up, what's yes.
That is outside the scope of no.
That's outside the scope of no. Right. And so it's people look at our civilization like it's bad or random. It's fucking genius, except that we didn't do it on purpose. Right? I mean, if you had to design if you had to look at evolution and human behavior, you have to design the perfect system, which is what I've tried to do. Right? You finally discovered that we pretty much had it. Right.
Right.
Now, the perfect system for what? Well, I mean, if you want to feel like you're equal to everybody else in wallowing poverty, then go to Islam. If you want to feel like you're irresponsible like everybody else, go to China. Right? If you want to feel like you're harmonious like everyone else, go to India. The problem is all of those things reduce the rate of evolutionary computation to a point of collapse. But what we do in Europe, right, is for some reason, because we have all these federated states, if one empire collapses, the next group picks it up. It's a marketplace, right? And in our government, our political system, we have cycles of rise and collapse. Just like in our economy, we have cycles of rise and collapse. So the only thing we need to do is maintain the system itself of rules, the algorithm, for continuous recursive evolutionary innovation, discovery, innovation, application, adaptation, and evolution. We only have to maintain that system of rules. And it turns out that we've been doing it really closely for a long time, despite all the attempts to defeat it. All the attempts to defeat our government, our way of life, which we think of as the modern English state, but is the same in the Greek world, the Roman world, whatever, is by an attempt to bring a foreign concept of monopoly to a European concept of market. In other words, to being devolutionary stagnation to evolutionary velocity.
Right. Now, their monopolization is the attempt to bring the universal empire of Quigley, which is final political solution that is devolutionary.
It's devolutionary.
He calls it stage 5. So civilizational stage 5. It's on page 150.
Well, I mean, I think what Huntington was saying, and certainly what the evidence is saying, is that civilizations are just an expression of a race.
Okay.
Right. A nation is a expression of an ethnicity, and so you'll never have a world government. You only drive toward because the internal needs of these races are different. You only drive towards some commonality, which we call natural law or international law, which is just natural law. All right, you'll drive toward that. And then just as the civilizations maintain civilizations, norms, customs, institutions to suit the demographic distribution of the population and geography, what you'll find is just like we say, let 1,000 nations bloom, so that every nation could adapt to the geographic, demographic needs and wants of a particular ethnicity. And so what you want, of course, is that the maximum number of these things working in a market, so you maximize the discovery, right? You want all these niches working to discover what works, then distributing it. So why did every other civilization fail, but Europeans keep renewing? I don't remember if Quigley knew that or not. I think that Quigley might have been one of the few historians that understood.
No, he talked about it with regard to his civilization. It renewed itself 3 times. So we're in the third.
Right. So there's a reason we renew.
Yes.
And this is the answer. But renewal at the civilization levels, the same at the state level, same at the economy levels, same at the generation. I mean, it's the same fucking process, right? So this thing is going on at all levels, but that's just continuous recursive evolutionary adaptation to rates of change in the environment, demographic, knowledge, and technology. So
right. So
we're just the best computer man's invented. The problem is that you have to be willing to suppress the reproduction of the bottom instead of parasitically extract from them. That's the really question. Now what the left does is they're creating a race to the bottom by first killing the middle class before they'll make the bottom dependent upon them, and then they'll continuously maximize, because that's what bureaucracies do. In other words, what's all monopolies do. They'll maximize extraction to the point of failure. Well, the truth is, in modern civilization, if the left succeeds, they'll just destroy they'll destroy this cycle first, right? And I just don't want to have another fucking dark age, because that's what they're bringing about, because that's what the females bring about. Female mind brings about.
That was 1,000 years. That was a pretty good run for the oligarchs after the destruction of the classical world. It's a pretty good run.
Well, it's just trick. I mean, think of it as like the if you have think of it as the accelerator on an engine. It just increases the gasoline. But essentially, cooperation is the number of RPMs, right?
Right.
The human RPMs, because you're trying to solve a problem with cooperation consistent times. So trade is what makes cooperation increasingly faster, because increasing cooperation, or the velocity of it, produces returns on time, right? You get more per moment of time of effort, right? With more trades going on. So what happens, of course, the left wants cooperation. They don't want trade. They don't know the difference. They think cooperation means giving shit away instead of solving a problem that produces more for everybody. But that's okay. So so what's happening is that, of course, it took 1,000 years to reconstruct trade on a land route instead of on a sea route, right? So trade could develop quickly in the Mediterranean, right? It could develop relatively quickly on the river valleys. But if you're trying to make trade across the European plain, it's far and it's costly. And the same thing is trade across the fucking steppe, nearly fucking impossible, or the desert or the tundra or the desert, right? I mean, so, you're just talking about the velocity of cooperation determined by geographic constitution. So Europe has wonderful rivers for internal trade, right? But now you have to get to where you got a population, the demand, the technology, right, to be able to make that work. We have wonderful rivers, and once Germany got railroads, then you could see what Germany could really fucking do, right? Those Germans give Germans a railroad, and all of a sudden, all that shit went somewhere. So what happened in Europe was the Hansas, which we don't study enough. We should study the Hanseatic League the way we study Rome, right? Because that's really what matters. We don't. We go from Rome to France and England, right? We should go from Rome to the Hansa to England and France and Holland.
Right.
And we focus on all these wars internally. The wars are just competition for who's going to govern the continental mass, but it's actually the waterways that make the difference, not the continental masses. So we love our politics so much that we forget that it's ancillary to the development of trade. So, the Hansa develop it. Why did the Hansa develop? The Hansa developed with Vikings. Why are Vikings successful? Because Christians had so successfully domesticated the continent, and Muslims had so successfully raided and destroyed the economy of the Mediterranean that it was the only place we could start rebuilding our readaptive civilization. So, I mean, if we talk about the Crusades, but if they had even had the vaguest interest in winning, they would have. They basically did, and the only reason they didn't is they're having more fun with politics back home, right? And so, anyway, my point here was that it's that the rate of the engine of progress and prosperity is basically trade. The problem is trade in some places way fucking easier, river valleys, if you've got simple boats, right? Seas, if you like Mediterranean's a peaceful sea, right? If you've got real boats, right? And the Atlantic, if you've got ships, right? I mean, there's a difference between a floating object, right? A boat, which is, and a ship, right? It just basically the river, the sea, and the ocean, right? And so, we got, I don't know what you call those little corals. It starts with a C. Well, anyway, and they make a reed boat. They've been making reed boats.
I don't know the name of them.
They're making these things for since the dawn of man.
Right.
Right. We don't even know when they started making them because they're made of reeds, so they disappear. But the original, for what's his name, Finkel in UK, he says that he's very funny to listen to, by the way. He says that if they look at the original Noah's Ark story, it's these round. It's just a very big one of these round. I think corals, these round little reed boats.
Right.
I feel like
I was looking it up. I was trying to find the name for you. It's okay. We don't need it.
Anyway, so
reed boats. Thor
round. What?
Thor Heyerdahl rode one of these things in the Pacific Ocean or some craziness. Like, what a wild bunch of people.
He's an awesome guy. Talk about a guy. He's a perfect 18th century Brit in the sense of science by spectacle.
Right.
right? And which is, you know, he combines research and heroism
Right?
and expeditionary forces.
Adventuresome behavior, yeah.
I mean, he's just such a great example of how to do it. And, you know, during the age of sail, there were so many of those guys, right, who were combining discovery and science and spectacle to get attention. And one of the reasons I like that model is because that's how you got the monarchy or the parliament or the nobility to give you some money, right? Because now that person gets status from having funded you.
Right.
Right. And so I just love that. And like the one of the reasons for English success is, of course, the Royal Society, right? Which is just basically that. It's basically a bunch of people with money giving people money for scientific discoveries and gambling on them. And what I love about it was the first of all, it was a human scale. So a lot of the stuff could be done by individuals or small groups. Today, I mean, we've got to build a fucking hadron collider in order to, you know, the large, you know, the what is it called, the Large Hadron Collider, in order to make a discovery, you know.
Right.
But you know, we have that much more money than they did then. I mean, we forget that how much, you know, we're fucking 130 times richer than we were like 200 years ago. Sorry, I've been like, I must be. Oh, it's the coffee. I'm getting plugged full of rants this morning.
Good, man. It's like that. So I'm trying to loop back a little bit towards the law and decidability and ambiguity. Where does the meaning lay? Who gets to be the judge, and the judgment, where does it lay? Right?
Yes.
I'm going to make you the host so you can share your screen.
Mesopotamian reed boats, earliest built. I can't see it. Coracle. I was close. I knew it had more than one syllable. I just couldn't remember what it was. A coracle.
Very good. Yep.
It's just sort of explained Western civilization's successes, and it's only 1140.
That's not bad work.
You know, and people, and the sad part is, that's why, so one of the reasons I said we need a Bible, not a Bible of parables, a Bible that describes why our civilization succeeds. We need a prescription and a proscription, right? We need it, and it needs to be written in our language, because we're legalists, because we're laws, not mythologists or authoritarianists, right? So I want to write this down. So it's the law, our Bible. And this is just what you can't do, and how to do things, how to organize things so you can do good and not bad. Because as far as I can tell, what?
It's like maximization of the good you can do.
Yes.
That's
but we don't have to tell people what the good is. And that's what everybody else has to do. But the minute you tell them what the good is, that means you're stagnating. Like living in harmony with nature sounds really good until you realize what's happened to the Chinese because of that decision. Right? Is they're avoiding evolutionary computation. So we pay. This is why, and this evolutionary computation is why women hate it, and it's why other cultures can't practice it. It's because it requires extraordinary duty, loyalty, and trust. Right, and so cognitively, emotionally, it's the most difficult civilizational model. So why do we expect all these primitive people to come in here and multiculturalize when they fucking can? In other words, when the cultures aren't equal in cost, right? And they're not equal in ability, right?
That was a trick question, by the way.
Are you tricking me, or am I tricking you?
That was a trick question, because it's why do we want to do the thing we don't want to do? Is that,
Yes.
Is that the question?
That's the question.
Right.
They don't want to do it. Well, a couple of things will happen. First of all, they'll always be on the bottom. Right? If they get to the top, like a certain subgroup has, they can do so by lying, cheating, and scheming, and propagandizing, and socially constructing, and baiting women into hazard.
They'll be bribed to do so.
Right. So we have to be able to stop that kind of crime.
I would call it cynical opportunism.
Oh, a female mind does not know it's criminal.
It's grifters. It's grifting.
What?
We call it grifting.
Yeah, but they call it trying to do good.
Well, they can believe their own nonsense.
Well, that's the thing. What do women do? They believe their own nonsense. They justify. They achieve advantage by whatever underhanded means is possible, and then they justify it. Men don't really so much. We just say, I'm just fucking better than you, suck my dick.
What? That's fairly accurate. Oh my.
And men are like, well, fuck, he's better than me. What? God damn it. Well, I guess I'm standing in this line to get shit done now instead of that line to get shit done. I
Right.
mean,
It's gotta be organized somehow.
Yeah, it's the hens problem. Is women are hens, they never stop pecking each other because they can't predict future position. But men, we're like, I just want to know where I am in the fucking hierarchy and how to succeed.
That's right.
That's all I want to know.
Just read the manual and work from the book.
Yeah, most guys are pretty happy as long as they can reach a place of competency and respect.
That's right.
Right. And so the problem, of course, is that women don't want that. They want hypergamic reproduction. And they won't do their duty like men will. Right. Your duty is to we have a duty of producing civilization. They have in government and economy, and they have a duty of producing offspring in society.
Generations, right.
And that's a really good division of labor. If we break that division of labor, you see what you've had happen now, which is, by the way, the fault of the Russians, because they're the ones who said women in the workforce, women in the workforce.
Right. When was it?
The Soviets.
Yeah, blame the Soviets is different than blaming the Russians, man.
Oh, sorry. Well, I mean, okay, fine. Let's blame the Soviets. Women in the workforce, women in the workforce. Well, of course, what happens is Russia is acting out because they're having a population collapse. The only reason America isn't acting out because we're having a population collapse is we're replacing first world populations and demographics, which increase IQ, with a third world population demographics that decrease IQ. And when you decrease IQ, of course, you decrease evolutionary computation. Now you put women in charge of those people because women want to feel status like they're caretaking when they're not. They're just hyper consuming instead of actually innovating, producing, and providing competitive advantage. Women take over the rule, or women influence the rule over these underclasses, feel they're doing good. What they're really doing is burning civilization from the inside out with a flamethrower. I don't want to know this, right? I want to go back to being happy and ignorant.
In 1950.
I want to go back to thinking happiness and harmony and family and Christmas and
you want
and church and May Day festivals and Thanksgiving. I want to go back to being happy about normal traditions that evolved to assist us to cooperate in large numbers, that where we all could celebrate our successful victory over this evil, difficult thing called nature. I want to go back to that. Why do I have to even think about the fact that there's these evil people that have come along and taken advantage of the worst instincts of people, females, we give special dispensation to, all right, whether both instinctually and socially and culturally, right? You had a bunch of evil people come along and tell females their instincts, which are fucking absolutely positively cancerous when applied at political scale. I don't want to know that. I don't want to have experienced it. I don't want to live during it. it's fucking evil. And you look at people, how unhappy they are. They're all unhappy too, except they're chasing the wrong fucking religion. They're taking a religion of self-destruction. The Christians are right, is that, these guys are worshiping the devil. Well, I mean, if you're a fucking stupid Christian, I guess you want to frame it that way. But in general, and I was just trying to see if I get a reaction out of you by saying that.
Did it work?
What?
Did it work?
No, it's so fucking disappointing.
No,
And
right.
so
I know what that is, right? That's the tiniest violin going, Kurt. It's going.
but I mean, but they're not wrong in the sense that they're worshiping self-destruction.
It is absolutely psychological warfare against the apparatus of the male hierarchy of Western civilization. That's all. And it occurs to me that this cyclical destruction is like this. It is the inevitability of the expiration of the lies that were told to the previous 3 generations that were bought hook, line, and sinker. And now it's going sour because the lies, the piper's here to get paid, and the piper will be paid, and everyone's not going to get their share that was promised by the lies. And now we have to generate a new social order out of that mess.
Right. I mean, the strong generation pays the cost of reducing future generations' cost. The next generation begins consumption of the savings, but they've also somewhat adapted to paying some of the costs. The next generation stops paying the costs and consumes it, and the last generation hyper consumes it, right?
Here we are.
Without paying any of the costs. And so you have this, it's just a waveform, right? I mean, going on, and it makes perfect sense. So the difference is some civilizations get tired of the waveform, and what they do is they just produce stagnation, i.e. the Middle East, India, China, right? And some of us just keep fighting the good fight because there's always a reserve somewhere of some guys.
It's unavoidable.
Because low power, really important. Low power, small states mean low power distance.
Right.
It means the ability for the immune system to recover.
That's it.
Does that make sense?
That's it.
Small states allow, this is why monarchies are so important. And monarchies and what we call empires, which is collections of monarchies, are so important, is because you can have this head die off, but now you've still got all these other heads that can grow up, right? So it's an incredibly market system. But if you have a monolithic system, if it's headless like Islam in India, or if it's got a head like China, I mean, if it's headless, you can't fucking fix it. And if it's got a head like China, it's almost impossible to replace it. Right. And when it does, it's fucking, I mean, China always talks about their history like it's some golden fucking thread. I mean, they're way more barbarous than fucking Europeans ever were. And they have just, they talk about like they were first and best. Dude, you're practically on a fucking island over there in East China, right? You're practically on an island. You're surrounded by natural barriers, and you have an even more amazing geography of rivers and lowlands than mountains, rivers, and lowlands and monsoons than the United States has in the grain belts. So what are you talking about? You have every fucking advantage, and you've basically got a fortress China by way of geography. So of course you're going to be better off. The people you look at and you say, fuck it, poor guys in Africa, man, that sucks. No rivers, fucking it's hot, right? There's no way to get there. There's full of diseases. There's right. I mean, and then you go to the Middle East, it's like you're surrounded by Africa, the steppe, the hill people, the desert people. And it's like you're surrounded by an asshole manufacturing industry, right? And Europe, we're like China, like we've got this wonderful thing. The problem is we have the Eurasian plain, right? So where China doesn't have a highway into China, we have a highway into Europe. And so what you've got, the problem with the Eurasian plain is that it's a highway into Europe. And because we never really, if we'd have been smart, we would have widened the Bosphorus rather than building a bridge across it. We'd have dug that fucking thing out so nothing could get across it. Anyway, at least we've got the Caucasus Mountains.
It's all good.
Anyway.
Life is good.
All right, so what?
We're gonna work on the law some more, I presume.
Well, you brought up this fucking amazing.
It's like, where is decidability? That's the question. And does the judge have judgment? Or is it decidability that he doesn't get to legislate?
He's trying to use, it's a sum problem. So the law can be decidable,
right?
The law, but the judge must issue a judgment, right?
Right.
And unfortunately, there's two meanings to the word judgment.
Yes.
The judgment in the decision-making sense, or the choice sense, and judgment in the sense that he has rendered a judgment and issued it, right? It's a physical thing, a writ, right? Versus the conceptual thing which goes on in his mind. So the purpose of law proper, what I do, what you do, what you help me do, what the guys help us do, is produce decidability, right? So a law can be constructed as decidability, but and this is why laws are prohibited under rule of law. They must apply to everyone equally. Which, by the way, that's what they broke with. That's what they broke with the what do you call it? The Civil Rights Act. They made laws not apply to everybody equally. So you see what happens when you break one of the first principles of law. It's fucking bad stuff. So so it came out here, and this is, well, you have this problem of saying it has to be universally applicable, and it's a universal law. So it's called a general rule, right? And a general rule has to be all the criteria we covered in our last session, which is a long list of criteria for a law to fit. Right? Right. But then the judge might be in a condition where he's trying to decide there are all these causal axes here, and there are all these laws that are interacting. So he's trying to basically do a geometric puzzle of, given all these competing factors, in this particular instance, not this universal rule, but in this particular instance, what full accounting,
right,
renders the judgment.
So the judgment is essentially the finalization of the accounting. Correct.
It's exactly. Your judgment is producing the sum of all these legal accounts. So the problem you get into is that while laws are decidable, we need to understand whether it's a tort law, right, or whether it's a crime. In other words, whether the person was practiced due diligence and etc., right, but they still entered into an error. In other words, because of informational density, whatever, through no fault of their own, even though they practiced due diligence, an outlying circumstance arose that, that even people who know what they're doing or even care about what they're doing just wouldn't have rationally predicted, right? And so you get into this case where they're saying, well, okay, is this is the jury's job. The jury's got to decide really not what the law is. They've got to decide your state of mind. That's really what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And that's why we're trying to break things down into operational sequences we call testimony,
Oh,
is because we're trying to decide first, what does the evidence say? Which means, did this really happen? Right. The second thing we're trying to do is figure out what your incentives were.
so it's like the Markov chain reconstruction.
Exactly. So what are your incentives? Well, what the jury's really trying to do is figure out you psychologically, because humans can imitate, empathize, feel, and sympathize, think, right? We can do all three of those conditions. And humans are marginally indifferent in imitation, empathy, and sympathy. Now, you and I might have different priorities, but if I understand how you are looking at the problem, I will understand it, right? And so the law exists to make sure that your moral bias and my moral bias don't interfere with this person's rational choice. That's a really profound thing I just said.
Yes.
Right? Because the law has to make sure that you're not subjectively biasing your opinion of what that guy did, or his incentives, by your personal bias. I wouldn't have done that, or I think that's immoral. Well, but that's different from saying, was he doing a logical thing, performing due diligence, and under these circumstances, had he adhered to the common trends or knowledge or rules or regulations, whatever, or is he really just trying to pull one off on somebody and get away with shit, right? This is why so many of our cases, the vast majority, never make it to trial, because this stuff is all found out in pretrial activity, and that's the reason we do so much of it. Is we do so much of it pre-trial. Now, I've been in a lot of pretrial activity, and I can tell you that we shouldn't be doing that. In other words, it's okay that what we're trying to do is move the cost of the trial outside of the courtroom. But the quality of people and the kind of nonsense that goes on in discovery without a judge there is really out of hand. But the point is that this is why we get so many settlements, is because there's enough truth exposure in the discovery process that you don't have to get to court. The reason I go to court is when I think I'm morally right anyway. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I am like, oh, fuck, I did fuck up. I got that wrong. Yeah, but you know what? I'm morally right. So and that's when you go on a jury, right? A bad person wants a jury because he thinks he can get away with something.
Mm-hmm.
A good person wants a jury because he thinks the law in this case is wrong. Right? And that's why you want the jury. And that's why we can never give up the jury.
Right.
Okay, so the point here is just that, is there's decidability is most important in the construction of the law, right? And judgment is most important in the disambiguation of the components of the judgment, right? What here is the law, what here are the circumstances, and what here are the incentives.
Right.
And now those take different places. The judge, the courtroom is trying to discover what the facts are, and the jury is trying to discover what the incentives are. And the fact that we don't explain this to people is I just view it as evil, right? Right. And so you say, what is the purpose of the legislature and the constitutional legislature? Is that you're supposed to produce decidability as a general rule. What he's supposed to do in a courtroom is determine the facts, and what he's supposed to do with the jury is determine the incentives. Does this really apply? Right? And then the judge is supposed to say, okay, as far as I can tell, the law was right, the facts were right, the jury was right, and everybody played a fair game here, and we should have come to this decision. Now, some judges will fuck with the jury and some won't, whatever. And some juries get all high and mighty and whatever. So this is the part we need to clarify, right? Because there's too much judicial discretion and not enough judicial judgment. And I want to make sure that we understand that. Just like I said, the purpose of the law is, as I state the law, is to be decidable, is to limit the jury to the psychology of the incentive within the facts and within the law stated. But the same thing is true of the fucking judge. The law has to be precise enough so the judge is issuing a judgment, not a discretion. In other words, he's not biasing it either. And so what we hope to accomplish, I think we have accomplished in our natural law, is we've eliminated that possibility. Where we want the judge to use discretion is in sentencing. And this is so the judge has three, he has, once guilt has been established, or guilt is the wrong, not always.
Right.
That we're trying to generalize it.
Right.
Right. Because you can be guilty of a crime, but you can also be ruled against in a civil matter.
Found to be liable.
Right, fine, right. So now the question is, once you're liable, in other words, once it's your fault, right? So this is important. You can be at fault or not, right? The court can win. You can win a court case, but it's different of whether they're going to do anything or not.
Right.
The judge doesn't have to do anything to you. He can say, well, I mean, this is, I agree, but I mean, she's a fucking 19-year-old mom with 3 fucking kids, and she's making $80 a month, and her brain is fried. She hasn't slept, right? And this is just a stupid. Right? I'm not going to pick on a 19-year-old mom and take money out of her kids' mouths because fucking coming to court and having to deal with this shit in front of me is enough to teach you don't want to do that again, right? Because why? Because she's showing remorse. Why do Black people end up in prison? They don't show remorse. Well, that's right. That's actually the answer. The statistics are out. Well, there's so many more Black people because white people show remorse. You know why? Because we're the only culture that practices guilt.
That was funny. That was Max was saying this yesterday, and
Yes.
your good dude show, because he was kicking kids out of the pool. It's like, and he noted a distinction between people based upon race, and it had to do with this remorse issue.
Right. So we're a high trust people. Right, we're a post-familial, post-clan, post-tribe people. We're nationalist people, and so we practice truth before face, and responsibility before gain. And so white people are weird. We're the outliers among humans. We are white, industrialized, educated, rich, and democratic, right? But we're white. Let's take the white off. We're industrialized, educated, rich, and democratic because we practice sovereignty, reciprocity, truth, duty, truth before face, a duty before self, and responsibility for gain. Right. And so what's happening, in other words, we're always contributing the commons instead of contributing the person, our individual consumption, our family consumption, our clan consumption, our tribe consumption. Again, the fact that we don't teach this is why we can get away with undermining it. So what happens is white people apologize and go say they're accountable and take responsibility because it achieves reconciliation. And familism, tribalism, clanism, tribalism don't practice reconciliation. The same way women rarely practice reconciliation. Even if women reconcile, they remember this shit for fucking lifetimes, right? Women never forget every injustice, right? At home, men, we just reconcile and move on. Right. And this is especially true in white civilization because we're post-individual, post-familial, post-tribal, clan and post-tribal. But so white people feel guilt. If you look at other cultures, they don't feel guilt. Russia's interesting in that they don't feel guilt. Right. They don't talk about the guilt they have for, we'll sit there and sweat and cry over our colonial period or our slavery period or our civil wars or whatever. We blame ourselves for all these crises in the past and we swoon over them. You can't get a Russian to talk about how what their responsibility was for the world wars, how many millions of people. They always fucking justify it. I'm like, yeah, we killed the fucking Indians. Well, we did it actually largely by accident. And yeah, they were brutal fucks, but we did kill the Indians. And so, but nobody else does that. I mean, try to get a Muslim to admit error, right? I mean, try to get a Jew to admit error, try to get a woman to admit their guilt, try to get a Chinese to, or the Chinese to admit their guilt. You can get the Indians to do it. They're another civil. They're Indo-Europeans. So we admit our guilt. And I forgot how we got on this fucking subject because I was going somewhere.
Remorse and reconciliation.
So we have remorse and reconciliation, which allows us to continue cooperating in a high trust environment because we've reconciled, we've restored high trust.
That's the commons. The trust is part of the commons then.
Exactly. And so what I say is other cultures don't want to pay the tax, the emotional, like your self-image, status, psychological, emotional, and sometimes physical cost of making the commons of trust, the commons of truth before face, right? They don't want to do it because their pride, right? Because this is really interesting. You swap all that internal petty animal pride for high returns on the commons.
Right.
But because they don't have commons, they learn to value pride, which we call honor culture.
Okay.
And so the honor culture sounds really well. I mean, if we look at, I can't remember what the three are. It's honor something and something. Again, it's not coming to me at the moment. So if you look at honor culture and the other variations, what they're really doing is they're saying, I'm not going to pay for the commons. It's a type of hyperconsumption.
Right.
What are you doing?
I was just typing it in. I was looking it up. See if I could figure out something, but I don't have time to figure out something right now.
So our course is decidability versus judgment. So what are decidability and judgment like, depending on the truth before face and the commons contribution of your public? Well, why do our juries work? High trust. Restitution, reconciliation, remorse. Oh, I got on it because Black people don't show remorse in court. So the judge, that's where I told myself I'm going to start writing down the beginning of the thread I'm trying to.
Yeah. I try to write them down too.
Because I'm like, I got to remember to get back on my point. So my point was that, I think I might have lost again. We want people in the courtroom. The judge is trying to decide. The judge has decided that there's guilt, right? Now he has to decide whether restitution is necessary, right? Unfortunately, we've got this fines thing, which I really don't like. Fines are probably the wrong thing, but we have restitution. We have punishment, which is to provide you with the incentives to not doing it again. And we have prevention, which is to make sure, not only that you don't do it again, but that other people don't imitate you because you've been too lenient in court. So you're trying to raise the price of the act.
Right. Of bad behavior.
Right. So this is why some judgments seem really excessive. And we ought to, and my argument is we should disconnect prevention from punishment. In other words, there was, if I want to increase prevention.
Account for it under a separate measure, you mean?
Right. It should be prevention should increase the future crime, right? It shouldn't increase the present, right? I mean, this is the problem we get into. So I've now decided whether the jury's decided in your favor or the judges decided in your favor. Again, you should never have just a judge decide in your favor unless it's ministerial, right? In other words, this whole idea of getting rid of the jury, gradually depriving us of the jury, that's got to go. But for that to go, we have to go back to, you got to fucking do this. To make it, you got to fucking do this. We got to fix how juries are brought together. Next, either that or we have to develop a class of citizens, right? That is capable of jury duty.
That's right, juridical class.
a class of people whose
Yeah.
whose profession is juror. Not whose profession, whose hobby or second job is juror.
Right.
Then you go off to so now you've decided this. Now you've got to decide, well, do I really need to do anything to this person? Right, that's the next step. Then the next step is, okay, if I do anything, what's restitution? Sometimes when it's restitution, you're trying to pay the other party. When it's a restitution for an administrative crime, it's usually a fine, right? So you're paying back the public for the cost of policing you. Right? I'm not really fond of fines because I think they are extremely pejorative to the people who are least able to pay them.
Right.
And most likely to commit administrative things because they have no money, time, or faculties. But that said, it also creates disincentives in the legal system. Now, on the other hand, now there's punishment. Now you've paid restitution. Well, isn't that punishment? No, that's not enough. That's just paying back the person.
Now you're at zero.
Now punishment is we're trying to make sure you never fucking do this again. So sometimes you want to have punishment. Now punishment might be incarceration. It might be public service, whatever. But people think public service doesn't work. It doesn't work on shitty people, but on working class people, laboring class, it fucking works. It works just fine. Same with the goddamn ankle bracelets. If you know anybody who's had to stay home for 6 months with a goddamn ankle bracelet on, it's torture. It's absolutely torturous. They remember. I don't want to do that again.
I think that's what our experience with COVID-19 should be sufficient.
And then there's prevention, which is I got to make a symbolic statement here because if anybody does this again, it's going to be really bad. My problem is they do this to Joe Schmo, who's like some fucking idiot, right? And he's done something stupid because he's a career criminal, whatever. You give this guy a 100-year sentence. Well, you give this guy a 25-year sentence and you say the next person that does this gets a 100-year sentence because now you know, right? You didn't know before. Now you know. If this comes up, well, now you know.
Right. So you could make a prescription inside the punishment or preventive aspect of the judgment.
Correct. And so, and judgments are open to discretion.
Right.
So the judge's job is to modify your fucking behavior. Right, that's his job with
psychological influence.
Right, he's trying to get you to stop being this person A and start being person B by raising the cost of being person A. Right, become person B. Now, people who have remorse, they tend to do okay. People who and people who have personality defects don't. I mean, there's people who are just defective, and that's a lot of people in jail are defective. They're psychologically defective. So of some of those people who are psychologically defective, some of them will crash. They will have collapse, and that's when you want the churchy people to come in.
What do you mean by collapse?
I thought we talked about this already, but drug addicts have to collapse before they'll reform generally. And that's dependent upon the amount of agency the individual has. Some people can just can just say, well, I've got the willpower to do this, I'll just do it. Right. But some people don't. And some people are in life circumstances where their stresses are such that they can give it up. And some people are in circumstances where they're constantly afraid. And so what we should do, of course, is work on removing circumstances where people are constantly afraid. Right. But any event, I forgot where I was going. So
Coercive element of the
okay, so the judge is trying to modify your behavior. And that's really it. And so, I'm talking about stuff, we're talking about stuff here, some of which is heady, right? But a lot of it's which just normal, you need to understand to be a human being. But we take people, we throw them into this system that's absolutely terrifying. right? Because, and they don't understand it at all.
Mhm.
And it's like a meat grinder.
Mhm.
Whereas if you actually know what's going on, the thing that the average white person does who understands, you're like, well, you just go with a cop, you go through the system, you work, you basically pay a lot of time, you show forgiveness, and then they let you go. Right? Because you're demonstrating the whole time willingness to adapt. Now you could do the opposite. I hate you fucking cops, whatever, right? I'm going to resist arrest. I'm going to threaten the police. I'm
my.
going to make a scene, right? I'm going to cause problems for everybody. I'm going to deny my blame. I'm going to, or my accountability. I'm going to lie about what happened. I'm going to get in front of the judge. I'm going to show I'm angry and I feel this is unjust. I'm going to never demonstrate remorse, right? What you're doing is you're saying, you're missing the whole point. Is the whole point here is to just make sure that you understand that this is unacceptable behavior and not to repeat it.
It is. It's like it's interesting. So it is like all that resistance means more energy has to be applied to break you.
Correct.
That's all.
Which is what they don't like. So it becomes this, instead of a virtue signal spiral, it becomes a resistance spiral to the point where what's the guy got to do? Put you in solitary confinement until you break? It's not like the judge wants to do that. What the judge wants to hear is, I won't fucking do it again. You'll never see me in here. I'm really sorry. I apologize to the people I did this. I shouldn't have done it. I was tired. I was on drugs. I shouldn't have been on drugs. I had a really bad day. I've been really stressed and it was absolutely my fault. And I'm really sorry. I'll never be here again.
Right.
And then you don't get there again. And if you get there again, you say, Judge, I promised you I wouldn't be here again. I let myself get out of hand. That's what you do, right? But you don't go in there and claim that you're fucking innocent. What's really happening, of course, is that humans can't compartmentalize. So you're at a rage about life. You're a rage about your circumstance in life. You're at a rage about the people who are surrounding you because they're equally raging at life. And equally raging at life people and equally raging at their circumstances of life tend to aggregate because no one else will fucking put up with you. Right. And so what happens is you surround yourself with the whole people are equally raging at life. The only way to fix that is you have to give up being mad at life.
Right.
Right. That's what we're trying to get you to. Now you can get people to that crisis, right, by increasing the burden on them until they give up, and then they can be reformed. Or you can try to counsel them. Right, that's the male versus female methods away. But and it turns out both methods work, but they don't work on right. No method works on everybody. So when your nephew or son, whoever is talking about law, who was it?
My nephew's in the law.
Is that they're right that judgment is necessary, discretion is not. Judgment is necessary in adjudication, but discretion is only necessary in correction.
But not in decidability.
So decidability, judgment, discretion. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And the problem is the law has to be precise enough to disambiguate those three cases. The problem we have in the West, given the Ninth Circuit's misabuse of our Constitution, because Californians and certain other people are so bad at it, is that the point of our law, our law is not precise enough, which is what I'm doing here, is not precise enough to limit a judge to limit the parliament to decidability, the judge to judgment, and to leave only open discretion in sentencing.
I like that. So it's a proper allocation of these aspects of the law.
It's a funnel,
right?
From general to specific.
But it's allocation of the particular field of responsibility to the appropriate authority is the issue.
Correct. And the important point is the judgment of the judge, right,
Yes.
is different from the judgment of the jury, right? And so the jury is trying to get, the judge is trying to do law and procedure. I'm going to write this down.
Yes.
Right? Where the jury is trying to judge, largely, they're trying to judge incentives, intent, right?
Right.
Right. Incentives are an important word versus intent.
Yes.
Intent means you are aware of what you're doing, and incentives include you're also not aware of what you're doing, right? Because we are very often unconscious criminals.
Yes.
Right. So I wanted to cover that because it's so important. And again, it's a great example of why serialization, disambiguation by serialization and operationalization help you understand how a system functions. Now, our system may evolve that way, but it didn't necessarily evolve that way because somebody wrote it down as a system. It evolved because we're trying to preserve self-determination by self-determined means by sovereignty and reciprocity, which limits everyone from exercise of authority when authority means discretion. Right. So
Right.
we're trying to eliminate, we're trying to reduce discretion to its sphere of influence. Now, if I've listened to you in court for a while and you're demonstrating this behavior, my sentencing is a reflection of your behavior.
That's right.
Right. Right. That's discretion because that's the evidence I have before me. Your judgment of which includes the jury, is done by the evidence presented by the adversarial conflict before the court. The judge's judgment of procedure and law is there to make sure that that presentation of evidence is sufficient to produce only truthful evidence and in order to produce the incentives for the jury. Right. And so, so the judge is supposed to, judges got a hard job, really. I mean, we pay them pretty well and they have a high status, but honestly, it's a good thing. Because you want the judges to be people who are extraordinarily capable. The problem is that it becomes an arrogant asshole and this is partly for same thing in your profession. And the reason I find your profession of being doctor is because the average doctor, the doctors is the highest average IQ other than say university professors and STEM. Right. And so the problem is, but the people who work in the medical profession industry are usually in the 90s. So there's a huge gap between the ability of a doctor and the staff. The same thing is true for a judge and the court procedure people, the clerks, right?
Okay.
Is that there's a huge difference between the judge and this is more true in those two professions than almost any other. Like one of the reasons I love working with engineers, right, and scientists is because that doesn't true. Right. There's definitely a higher incompatibility, but the people you're working with, the barrier to entry, it doesn't have clerks. Right? There's no clerk equivalent of an engineer. We call them testers. Ooh, shouldn't have said that. There's no clerk equivalent of business people. We call them marketers, or in the negative, HR people. Right?
That was rude.
I had we hired, my whole management staff was against me on this because I've always been against HR departments. I've never had one. We got to the point where it's great, Kurt, that you say this, but the amount of time I spend on HR issues is getting out of hand. Because the way I view it is, if you're a recruiter and you hire somebody, you fucking own them. Right? Because that's responsibility, accountability, liability. Right. And you own them. So if you keep hiring people into this company, you don't get to toss them over the wall to HR. If you're a recruiter, you own that fucking person. And so if that person's not happy, they talk to you because you gave them the fucking job. Right. And then you're responsible for having them talk to management and administration and accounting or whatever to work stuff out. right? Well, you say, well, that makes the recruiter, no, it actually does the opposite. It makes you get the best fucking recruiters in the world because they fucking love it, because they own the people. And they understand this, that their career is based on those relationships.
Right.
And now that relationship has power, right? As a recruiter, you have power in the company. So I'm like, no fucking HR. If you got a problem to go to, you got a problem with payroll, you go to payroll. You got a problem with benefits, you go to benefits. You got a problem with management, you go to the manager. You got a problem with the manager, you go to senior management, right? But the answer is the person who's governing that's the fucking person that hired you. Because in my view, I signed the paperwork, but your recruiter hired you, not me. Right? So I hate it. Well, we eventually got to where we have, and the RH guy, our guy was awesome, really, because he knows this is, because I'm legendary for this rant, right? And so this I love the guy, right? He was really good. He maintained that. He's like, this is their responsibility. It's none of this bring in socialists. And this is again why I think if you want an HR department, it's got to be run by men. All right, I didn't mean to that digression, but it really shows off the clerical problem.
Oh, I will tell you the absurdity of the week. The absurdity of the week was this: is I call a medical office because I need to get records. Because I asked for records before, and the second attempt they sent a bunch of things that were not the right records. So I'm like, trying to call them up, and I got a hold of the staff member, and the staff member tells me, says, I don't know the fax number that you need to send it to request the records, because I don't know where the records are being stored. And I said, that doesn't surprise me, and it appalls me at the same time. It's utterly repulsive. And he says, well, I just was hired a month ago. I'm like, I wasn't surprised. And I just said, he wanted another day to work on it. I'm like, go, man, you just get back to me when you figure it out. Just because.
Yeah.
This is
a
the system is broken.
This credentialism and proceduralism in medicine is, of course, it's not just medicine, right?
No.
It's fucking everywhere. But this happened everywhere because we're really trying to shove people not competent to do the job into jobs they're not competent to do. My favorite complaint is that I have had a lot of health problems in my life. I mean, just fucking every goddamn thing, right? And just diagnosing my cancer took years, and MRIs and tests. And so my thing is, if you produce a medical record, you're responsible for that to be online in 24 hours, right? And you don't get to get rid of it for a lifetime. Right? Because the number of times I've had to have a new MRI done or a new chest X-ray, I'm like, dude, you know how much radiation I've had in my life? I should be on an airplane, right? And so they're like, well, it's just this much. It's always just this much, but if you keep making me do these things for just this much, it's not just this much anymore. Right. And so I'm like, I'm walking around with it because my cancer is incurable, right? It's a microscopic cancer that's not curable. It's just incredibly slow growth. So, it won't kill me unless I live to be 150 or something, right? So anyway, so this problem is out there. And so, you deal with these fucking people and it's like, you're so fucking irresponsible. Or I went in to get an what do you call it? Ultrasound, right? Ultrasound.
Yes.
Right. For for cancer, right? I go every year, right? And so for me, it's got to be from back here, down here, up here, and then it's got to come down into here. Because I have little nodules down in here that I always want to watch, right? Because but I don't have any nodules here. I don't have any, what do you call them? Lymph nodes in my neck, which is why my neck I have a fat neck because it's nothing but scar tissue and nothing but scar tissue. So go in there and like, well, I didn't get the test to do that part of your chest. Like, what the fuck? You're standing right there. Just goddamn do it. Or no. And she argues with me, and I'm like, well, then why am I here? I know there's no nodules in my fucking neck, right? I know that I don't have a thyroid. I've had 2 surgeries, right? I've had a laser used on it to get the last bit of thyroid tissue out of my neck, Right? The only thing I care about is down here, and you're telling me you're not going to do it when you're standing right there. Why the fuck am I here? Right? I mean, and it's just the incompetence, right? And it's not only the lack of judgment and the lack of discretion.
Lack of responsibility,
Yep.
responsibility avoidance. That's why they ask you to get another x-ray, because it's like, well, that's not the x-ray that I ordered, and I ordered the x-ray that I want so that I can be satisfied because I'm responsible, and blah, 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 blah.
I mean, if the guy told me that, that'd be fine. But then when the freaking clerk tells me she's not gonna spend the extra minute and a half to do this region of my upper chest because it was only ordered for a neck, I'm like, why? I mean, you know why it is? It's one of those checklist things. The checklist, the doctor can't write what he wants, right? He has to pick a menu item.
I hate to say it, it is the menu picking. It's just awful.
Awful. Where
I used to write
down by the doctor, and this is my concern, right?
Yes.
And then if our life depends on, like, if it depends on every doctor having a clerk to translate his writing into some set of actions, that's a good payment. But prohibiting the doctor from discretion, right, is fucking cancer. And so it's disastrous, and that's endemic everywhere. And
That's right.
the problem is that the kind of people who write the software for these industries is the kind of people who use the software for these industries. And, I can't tell you how many, like when I did the implantable heart device software, I mean, I'm like, this has to be used by a clerk, but I'm not going to make a doctor do that, right? I mean, I'm just not going to write that software. You can tell me that, but I tell you what, you're going to hate it that you disagreed with me in a year if you take your advice. Tell you what, I'm going to build it, and if you don't want it, you can disable it. But I'm putting it. They always use it, right? I mean, it's like software is a little too much of give the customer what they want when they don't fucking know enough to know what they want. And the reason you do it is because it's so expensive. Now, my view is that it's really not, right? And if I have to eat $1,000 or $10,000 of development on a $2 million project,
right,
so that I can guarantee your stupidity didn't affect the outcome for success of this thing, I'll do it. I'll cut my profit by 10 grand because I know the reputation is worth that $10,000 investment.
That's right.
But people just don't do that enough.
I hate to tell you, I don't want to go down this horror show.
Oh, I should tell you about the Kubernetes software. That'd be a great story. So people don't, I've designed software for pretty much anything you can imagine. TV commercials, scheduling and selling TV commercials, late night TV commercials. I've designed because my job is to design it, not to write it. Right. So I'm going to design software it's 3 a week, right? I mean, of sufficient scale. And you begin to look at all these industries, and that's why I like it. It's because you look at these industries, you see all these behavioral problems in the industries. You realize it's the same fucking behavioral problems throughout the society everywhere.
Generalization.
Everybody's elevated to their point of incompetence.
Maybe, and then a little bit more.
Fuck.
It is. It's sad.
Yeah, I got brought into the Coumadin thing, and I once I got involved, it's like, I don't want this because there's implantable device trials are one thing. But if I had to write the implantable, no, I'd have to know every line of code before I'd be okay with that. Right? I don't want to be in charge of that. Like Coumadin's like the same things. Like, I don't want somebody bleeding to death because I misplaced a semicolon, right? Or one of my guys misplaced a bracket on code. Because the problem with code is like 20% of the code does 80% of the work, right? But there's parts of the code that almost never get executed. And it's always in that part of the code that almost never get executed under extremely rare circumstances, that some conflation of rare events cause something bad to happen. Right? That's why they're try so hard with code coverage, right? Does this test actually test everything? Well, the truth is you can't think of fucking it.
This is it. So my dad wrote a book about aircraft accidents.
Yes.
It's like this. It's like, so what happened was aircraft accidents for the first, say, 60 years of flight, they were having novel accidents and with excessive frequency. Then what happened was the amount of accidents stopped increasing, but they couldn't eliminate them because it's a confluence of three crazy things that happen that are unpredictable. And it's just different combinations causing the problems. And there are just too many things that can go sideways, and you can't think of all the combinations.
I follow one guy in that space. It's really interesting. And he's evidence of the best people are not in the industry, they're outside of it. Right? The best analysts are often are definitely people that are not in the highest positions in the organizations. Right? And he puts like, nah, this is what went wrong. He's almost never wrong, right? But then you go through, of course he goes through it, and then there's other guys that go through all these the big failures that we hear about, right? You know, and it's stupid shit like under the right temperature, this insulation that doesn't burn does. Right? Or the plastic they used on this particular wire actually with the right voltage can burn. Right? And you're like, you can't have a fire in a goddamn airplane. I mean, you just can't. Right? And then there's other stuff you think any asshole would have figured out, which is hydraulic systems need to be isolated. Right? And they weren't. Right? And so you can, you know, the thing that's cool about a plane is like if you can move the engines, if you can regulate just the engines, which is the simplest part of a plane, be honest, you can fly the fucking thing, right? It's a nightmare.
Right.
You can steer a jet, at least with a two engine. So, I mean, there's stuff in there that, you know, you would think was incredibly stupid, or the thing that controls the tail rudder is a screw,
Right.
which, you know, it does this.
Yeah.
Right. That's a really fragile type of gear versus one of these, right? And it's not redundant. And so they're always in this battle of weight, right? Versus redundancy. And it's like, it's always redundant no matter what, right? There's lighter redundant is better than heavier single point of failure.
That's right. That's right.
But no, I was on a plane that was, it caught fire in,
oh my.
in the 80s. And it was just after I started having panic attacks.
Oh.
Jesus Christ.
Wow.
God, if I get on the ground, I'm never getting one of these fucking things again. I don't know why, but I lost after that, I rather quickly, I lost all fear of flying. I don't know if they have anything to do with each other, but I lost all fear of flying. Anyway, yeah, so, you know, planes are a great example of complexity.
Oh, yeah.
And what we call coverage is that the number of systems, the problem is you can test a lot, majority of the work is done by a minority of the systems under even stressful conditions. But there are conditions that you can't really test for, or you can't even predict, or even if you predicted, you can't, you know, you can't like try. It's like you have to try to crash planes in order to run the test, right? So they do their best. My favorite thing, because I know a lot about Boeing because they've been a customer, is that they buy toilet paper the way they buy advanced materials. And so that's why I think it's just so funny to go there is like, it's an example of what goes wrong in company culture. Is like the purchasing department is like, has this mentality is that everything they buy is part of an airplane.
That's
and so
right.
if they're like buying paper towels, and I'm obviously I'm exaggerating this for dramatic effect,
Right.
but you see this, and I haven't been involved with Boeing in probably 15 years, so I'm talking about 15, half a generation ago. But it used to crack me up that everything they would be the same degree of precision. Like, dude, it's fucking toilet paper. I mean, this doesn't matter, right? But everything matters, and so that mindset is really painful for me. And I have internal knowledge about advanced materials, you know, secret materials, right? Because I had to do some stuff with. See, I learned to do. The great thing about my business is I learned everything. You're basically a spy. if you're a technology guy or a finance guy, you're basically a spy. Like in advanced materials, right? The stuff that only certain people can know about and shit like that, right? And they try the software for that stuff. Well, they talk about the software the same way. And like, dude, you're talking about, managing inventory levels in a warehouse. It doesn't have anything to do with the durability. So you get the opposite. I'm sorry, I'll stop this rant soon. A company I really like is that I don't use their products is Frito-Lay. Is PepsiCo Frito-Lay? Yeah. Is that is one of, at least in my experience, it's one of the best run companies in the world. And customer service is fucking everywhere. In other words, again, it's been 15 years since I dealt with them. But one of the reasons I love them is that my primary advantage in talking to customers, which is my superior understanding of using technology to serve customers or sell the high value proposition, didn't apply to Frito-Lay because they already maximize the consideration of everybody in the value chain, right down to the fucking truck driver, right? And they already already understand they don't have a complex value proposition. It's like, I can't really help you because you have my two skills.
Right.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go off on a rant there, but
it was all right. He's all right.
So we covered today a great first section on evolution, on the Western model of evolutionary velocity and how it compared to others. I thought that was a really good piece. In the second, we brought up your wonderful topic of decidability versus judgment versus discretion. Wonderful. And then we talked about as our humorous bit, our laugh at the result of credentialism and clericalization of industries that we want to be adaptive, and we're actually preventing them from being adaptive.
It reminds me of that part reminds me of that experiment in the rat utopia. It's just rat utopia. It's like you've put enough mutants in there and we can't do our job anymore. We're done with the collapse.
You lose corrective ability. Prescriptive dominance ends adaptive flexibility, which suppresses innovation, which drives out talent. I think this is the important point: is talent masters judgment and discretion.
Yeah.
Talent masters decidability, judgment, and discretion. And so the problem is you drive talent out of industries, causing them to collapse. Now, I want to parallel this to the female culture of driving competition out of organizations. Is you drive competitors out of organizations, causing collapse. What happens in my experience is the competitive people rise to the top and the uncompetitive people stay at the bottom and become resentful. And so what you find is the power law is expressed in companies at only where it's capable of expressing it. And the more female interaction you have at the top produces more competitive suppression, which produces more competitive collapse.
Which is the John Galt moment, right?
Yep.
So drive the talent out.
Right. So I used to tell people I always want to run a private company, because the problem with the public company is it begins driving talent out of the business. You think it's good, it drives volume of talent in, right, at some levels, but it really limits your ability to take longer and longer term opportunities. So for me, I look at it as you need very little capital if you're visionary to move the needle incrementally over time. Whereas if you need a lot of capital to move the needle very quickly in time. And so this was what I see to happen in large companies. They become calcified. Public companies become calcified because it's too much blame for taking a risk, right? Whereas my view is Napoleonic view is you don't take a risk, you take 5 cheap risks, and at some point 3 of them will survive. right? At some point, 2 of them will survive. At some point, 1 of them will survive. And of those 5 risks, 1 of them go. But meanwhile, when that one collapsed, you created another one. When that one collapsed, you added another one. So what you do is you're always betting on this, but you have to be able to sacrifice profits in order to acquire new markets, new products, services, and information. And so what happens is between the government taxation, interest rates, and the tendency of internal employees to consume all profits and consumption, you end up with only being able to take one of these. And you get to a public company, you can take none. What I love about Elon Musk, of course, is he's like he's the end, is what I'm saying, right? He's like, you take the big fucking risks over the long term by massively relying on talent, right? That is not limited by other talent, by less talent. It's the same thing with Xerox Palo Alto Research Center, Xerox PARC. Everything we're doing today comes out of Xerox PARC. Why? Because they took all the talent and put it in there without the clerical labor that degrades talent, without the women. Well, there was actually women there. I shouldn't say that. I was dating one of the smartest women in technology and she's probably the one that got away, right? For me, I won't say her name. And for me, she's the one that got away. And her thing is user interfaces, right? And she's absolutely capable of competing with guys on whatever. And she would never make the same stupid chick errors, right? So it's not like I'm talking about like HR chicks and clerical chicks and stuff, like marketing girls and
Not all
admin chicks and that kind of stuff. They're fucking disaster. I had a wonderful woman developer work for me. His name, again, I won't mention. And we acquired her with a small company I bought. And you're talking about the kind of woman every guy wants. Feminine, completely rational, completely, right? Great developer, perfectly, competitive advantage all the way. Just sort of more pleasant to work with.
Yes, yes.
And you know what? Her thing is, those women, they don't want guys in technology. They want manly men, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. So I will tell you a story that's kind of like this, goes to this institutional ossification and systemic failure. It's like, so I had a personal friend of me and my business associate who went through the appropriate, she did not want to abuse the side channel, the back, she could just ask us for something. She wanted to go through the proper channels because she's a nurse. She went through the proper channels and was frustrated for a long time. And then she complained to the system. And I'm like, you don't ever do that, because the system is not going to change. It won't change. You're not helping, and you're frustrating yourself because it can't handle it. It's always going to be broken.
Yep.
And it's, what a world. John Galt is gone. He's left his desk.
To some degree, I pulled a John Galt, right? I just said I had enough of this shit.
That's it.
And that's what I mean. Some degree, the whole what generation, whatever it is pulling a John Galt. They're just opting out.
Well, they're being encouraged to do so by the great mommy government
In the sky, yeah.
right? And it's like, what does that mean? I guess until it breaks, then they can get back to work.
So frustrating.
It is. It's quite frustrating.
Well, we covered we had our entertainment warm-up chat at the end here where we did some storytelling.
Yes.
Which for some, I can't tell if people enjoy or not. They never complain about it.
Tell us. Well, tell them to tell us.
Storytelling is for me is how I maintain levity in what I consider a very serious subject. I'm going through I'm going to share for a second if you let me.
You're the host.
Make sure I'm sharing the right thing.
Right.
Is that Mark's
all legitimate?
Right. So again, we started out with morality, reciprocity. We worked our way through what these different terms mean, legality, legitimacy, what morality means, how is law legitimately constructed. We have some fun asides here. I didn't cover adherable and enforceable because I thought they were, and failure criteria is opposite, right. I actually forgot what we're going to go into next.
Okay.
So I'll try to prepare for that for tomorrow.
Okay.
Because I think I said it was the construction. Yes. So once you go from properties, you go to the construction. So I was going to go to how you actually organize a law as a template, as a class. Class being a term we've borrowed from software, which means is a general a set of rules, properties and methods, and data properties and methods that constrain or define the behavior of an object, right? So we'll cover that tomorrow. What I'll do is I'll take judgment, I'll take the sequence decidability, judgment, and discretion, and add it to this section here. I'll find out where that goes. That goes on a little later on. And then tomorrow we can pick up with that bit of it.
Very good.
All right. Did you have fun today?
I did. And
I don't, did you see that? Can I do you have a few minutes to talk about nonsense?
Sure.
All right. So did you see this whole thing with the Vox Day thing and the evolution argument, or were you outside of that?
I don't know what you're referring to.
Okay, so some fundamentalists said the math couldn't be done. He'd done the math and human evolution from a common ancestor with chimps couldn't be possible. No, I don't, And so somebody says you're a liar, Doolittle. Evolution isn't because my whole point is evolution is the engine of all existence, right?
Right.
So I mean, it's the first general rule. It says you're a liar, Doolittle, whatever. So I'm like, I'm not going to blow this guy off. I'm going to make an example of it so I can teach the audience.
Right.
So then they bring in this guy Vox Day, who's like another alt-right guy who's probably from the same background I am. He's sort of libertarian, right? And his thing is economics.
Right.
But he says, I've done the math. And so I just sort of spent a little time in a tete-a-tete trying to understand them by King of the Hill game. And then J.F. Garrity did a show on it because he was mentioned in this little thing. And then I went on J.F. Garrity's show to make my case, and we had a lot of giggles about it. And then I wrote a piece on it and published it yesterday on the YouTube channel about I think I called it doing the math, believe the scripture, and women should be believed. I don't know. Something along those lines, right? And I sort of,
that was remarkably rude, even for you.
Right.
Sorry.
I can't remember. I'm missing one in there. Anyway, I wrote this thing, and then so I was like, well, if I write this, it's harder to follow. But if I do it as a video, it'll be like 90 minutes, but it has a lot of density in it, and people will watch. So last night, after I had my nap yesterday, I recorded it, and I put it out there. So you might want to see that one too, and the audience might want to see that one. I think I can pull it up.
I saw the video, I think, but I didn't have a chance to look at it.
So you want to watch that if you can get a chance. The reason is that it's a pretty doing the math, trusting the science, doing the math. Oh, I shortened the thing. Believing the scripture, and women should be believed. No, trusting the science, doing the math, the scripture says, and women should be believed. Right? I mean, that was my full title, but it won't fit anywhere. So, but that was my original. And so I go through, what trust in the science really means, what doing the math means, what math means, right? Why this guy didn't do the math. And how much nonsense all of this is, right? I mean, this stuff is. And so I just, it culminates in a nice ending. So I thought I want to
Check it out
for you and the other folks. So anyway, so that if you didn't see that little back and forth, which I'm guaranteed to make this guy hate me for life, and his audience hate me for life, which is fine, right? I mean, if you're going to deny evolution, I'm not really, I don't have a problem with you hating me for life. It means you sort of selected yourself out of the intellectual gene pool. So that's fine. But anyway, I thought, if you hadn't seen it, it'd be something you'd find somewhat interesting.
I will check it out. It's like, I'll finish watching the Good Guys show from yesterday. And then I saw that one when I spotted the other one, I'm like, oh, I got to get ready to see Kurt. I got too much stuff happening right now.
There's also, what's interesting is that, we've been working on triangles for a long time, right? I put out that first triangle of the class hierarchy, which is the one on the white background with the black lines and the rings inside. I don't know, 212 or 13 or something. I know I thought of it in 2009, but I don't think I published it until 12 or 13. Anyway, so I put that out there. And so this has got a life of its own around, right? And so I didn't realize this, but Butch Leghorn, who's one of our earlier followers, he apparently worked with Nick Land on it. And then Max Danger, I don't know these guys' real name. I know Nick Land, of course, but then Max Danger worked on it. And of course, this has come around to this beautiful cooperative effort to produce all the triangles. And I'm like, dude, that's an amazing amount of work in there, right? And there's almost nothing wrong with it. And so I just want to make sure I can give credit to everybody and I also the reason I want to give credit to everybody is partly to say, it's not all me, right? There's a lot of people who participate in this program, and it's sort of, I might sow these seeds, but a lot of people contribute to this stuff. So it's not just Kurt, right? I mean,
there's some Sharpies too. I was listening to him speak yesterday, and I'm like, wow, it's impressive.
Yeah, you can sort of, Luke is quiet, right?
The quiet ones make me nervous.
Yeah, but I like it because he's starting to say more, but he's got the informational density right. So Eli doesn't say much either.
He's real quiet.
And the problem is he likes to put humor in it. So you miss the humor belies his understanding of what's underneath that humor, which if you actually get him to do it in writing, it's brilliant. And then of course, Martin at this point is becoming a master of classical studies, right? I mean, he's read fucking everything, right? And he knows this stuff cold. The thing that's funny about Martin is he's quiet, and he also speaks in this, Eastern Europe, and he speaks softly. He doesn't get out there and speak in proper German prose, right? With the
right.
So, but I mean, if you understand, gems fall out of Martin's mouth. And the thing I think about is really funny about Brandon is that he's so far ahead. He says something in 6 words that
right,
is
and it takes a minute to sew it together in your head.
Told you. Wow, there was a lot in there. And so there's this wonderful combination of parsimony and depth, and I just think it's beautiful. But we've got a pretty big field of guys, right? And they're not all like sick, they're not like all dedicated to this group. Like Max is part of other groups, and everybody's got their network, and we're just sort of this group of guys that are in their section of all these networks. So I think it's really fascinating. But those guys, the nerd factor is high, right? Their desire to make you think they're handsome or dress well or anything else is low, right? But their intellectual honesty and capacity level is phenomenal. So, and at this point, they've been in it for, 3-4 years now or more. Eli's been in it the whole time. And so they're really freaking good at it. So it's really impressive. Now you're also in this sort of clan of people who are highly competent too. But I just think it's interesting because, and I haven't, of course, mentioned, the other people that are there. The good guys is just the people who regularly show up, right? I mean, Steve Pender doesn't show. Our guys in Australia don't show. Our guys in Germany don't show. Our guys in the UK don't show. Our guys in Egypt don't show. I mean, it's mostly the Americans plus Martin, because he's at the edge, right? When it's 6 p.m. here, it's midnight over there.
Yeah.
So, all right. I did my job.
Good work. We'll see you tomorrow then.
All right, boss. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.